Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am not here with Geeky Sparkles. We're going to talk about comic books and numbers, and it bores her. She's got better things to do this Monday morning. So we're going to talk about some rumors coming out about DC Comics getting downsized. Downsized! Coming from Bleeding Cool. Now, whatever you think of Rich Johnston over at Bleeding Cool, he does tend to be right when it comes to rumors. I would say more often than not. You may not like the way that he presents things. You may not like his personality. You may not like the muck-raking streak that he has. But he does tend to be right when it comes to a lot of these big rumors in the comic book industry. A lot of people do talk to him. And we're going to talk about this. DC Comics could be getting downsized. And what could be prompting this is the Warner Discovery merger. That Warner Brothers and Discovery are going off on their own, and AT&T is walking away from the dumpster fire that is Warner. And we have a lot of other news coming out today about kind of the aftershock of this merger, including CNN. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with CNN. But before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. Over 259,000 subs. Thank you so much for the support. We do talk about the comic book industry. Having worked in the comic book industry off and on for a number of years, and I walked away from it in 2015-ish, I think, because it didn't pay enough to pay the bills. And now, disclaimer, I never worked for DC Comics. I did have an interview there once. I had an interview there in, I want to say it was 1999 or 2000 with Mike Carlin. And I was there for, 3-4 hours. We talked. But at that point in time, there was a crash, and they weren't really hiring a lot of new artists, and getting into DC Comics was very, very hard at that point. So congratulations if you got into DC Comics back then. But I was told you need to draw as well as Art Adams to break into DC Comics. And I wouldn't break into comics, mostly on Disney Comics, until a couple of years later. But that was when they were in New York. And then they moved to California. How long has it been? Like 8 or 10 years ago, I think they moved to California, to Burbank. And now there's a rumor that they're going to downsize again. Now, it's interesting because there are a lot of rumors coming out at DC Comics. Daniel Cherry III, the activist publisher or editor-in-chief or whatever he was, he resigned. He went to, I think, Adidas. Now, I think on his watch, this is where we got the all new, all different Justice League, and all of a sudden, every single character in the DC universe is bisexual. All these things. This is. I think he had something to do with this, because the guy is a very outspoken activist, and I almost feel like he came in, he dropped a couple of bombs in the DC Comics universe, and then he just exited stage right. He was out of there after 18 months? I think it was like 18 months at DC Comics. Could have possibly caused irreparable damage to the brand, and he's out the damn door. Other rumors coming from Rich Johnston about mergers and all this stuff. But let's talk about this one. This is a rumor. DC Comics moving offices yet again to a hot desk model. Now, I think former DC Comics artist Ethan Van Sciver has talked about this before, the downsizing of DC Comics. Now, I don't know a lot of people over at DC Comics. I know more people on the Disney and Marvel side of things. And, he's been calling it. He's been saying, hey, things aren't good. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And it doesn't look very good overall for DC. If you're a freelancer for either Marvel or DC in 2022, I would highly recommend that you keep your resume updated, or that you look at crowdfunding, or you look at some other options, because I think there are going to be fewer positions available working in the mainstream comic book industry going forward. I know if I were in charge, I would just be like, yeah, we put out like 12 books a month, but they're all really, really good books that sell 6 figures, but we only put out like 12 books a month. Now, I know that's not sustainable, But I remember when I was a kid, I used to read mostly Marvel when I was a kid, and I could buy most of the main Marvel titles. There weren't a ton of titles out there like there are now. It was like, you had your Spider-Man and your X-Men and, Punisher and Avengers and Captain America. And, you could theoretically buy most of Marvel's line every month on your lawn mowing earnings, which I did. Anyway, DC Comics moving offices yet again to a hot desk model coming from Rich Johnston. It's time for some DC Comics reportage. Some people say that Bleeding Cool runs every story we get regardless of its provenance or likelihood. That's not true. Stories are weighed up by the reliability of sources, the closeness to the situation, and the number of confirmations. A couple of weeks ago, I got the word that over the past few weeks, DC Comics staff who had still been working from home had been allowed into the Burbank headquarters building to retrieve their belongings, which they couldn't get at during the lockdowns. Did they give them a box to put, like a long box to put all their stuff in? They've been told that Warner's was going to use the space for something else, and that DC Comics will no longer have access to these three floors of prime Warner Brothers real estate. Again, going back to this merger, right? Everyone was moving again to offices close by. It seems that DC staffers working from home, or in one case, Hawaii, had done such a good job during the pandemic that physical proximity in the primest of prime real estate was suddenly seen as an excess cost by the Warners. Yeah. The pandemic has definitely reshuffled the deck, hasn't it? What's really funny about this is I remember back in the day, if you wanted to work in the comic book industry, you almost had to live in the New York area. Like you had to be within driving distance of the offices, Marvel or DC. That's just how it was done. And now it's like, yeah, everybody can work from home. Isn't the internet grand? Isn't it great? At the time, I couldn't get a second source I was happy with, so I let it simmer. A spinning plate, waiting for a second shoe to drop. Rich, are you drinking? A second shoe to drop. And another horrendous mixed metaphor. And then that just landed in my inbox. Report posted to a private WhatsApp group. How did you get it? A report posted to a private WhatsApp group from one DC Comics staffer saw them packing up their cubicle for the new DC building and confirming they will now be working on a hot desk model in the new building, also known as a shared workspace. So WeWork, basically. It's WeWork. We've got desks here if you want to come in and schedule some time and work at a physical desk or take meetings, you can do it. If not, you're working from home. That indicates an office working environment in which people are not all in the office at the same time. So desks are not attributed to any one person. Any employee can sit down and use a desk as if it were their own. So you can have fewer desks and staff, which cuts costs in terms of office space and technology needs, also creates quite the soulless working environment. We're talking about a corporation, right? Devoid of personal quirks, which is why ad agencies that I have worked at have used this working model, have also thrown in table tennis tables. Snooker tables to create a, blah, 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 nice thing. We've got Pac-Man and beer, okay? DC Comics offices have become famous for reflecting the individual personalities of employees at their desks, booths, or cubicles. Whether that was Paul Levitt's, Dan DiDio, Dan DiDio's potted plants that Jude Terror once believed I was hiding in, or the DC branded neon signs on the desks that could be seen from the street. In the new building, it will be a first come, first serve for those who come into the building while the rest work from home. And Marvel's kind of not great now from what I've heard. They're sharing space, I think, with Disney Publishing. They're no longer at 387 Park Avenue South, which was the bullpen for a number of years. And I had the pleasure of visiting that when I was in high school. That was pretty cool. Wasn't what I expected. It was basically just like a regular office. Just a bunch of comic book pages laying around and a bunch of really stressed out, unhappy people. I was like, I expected, I don't know what the hell I expected. Freaking, Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld to just be hanging out. That's not what happened. It's actually kind of boring. But I got to go. At least I can say I got to go. Most DC Comics staffers will no longer have a permanent place to work. and no one can have their personal items in the office. Yes, this sounds very sterile. This is the utter state of the comic book industry at this point, guys. It's rotating staff, rotating titles. Everything is on borrowed time. DC Comics is not the only business going through post-lockdown changes. The plan is for employees to come into the building when necessary for meetings or group projects, again, like a WeWork, but spend most of their time working from home, only coming into the building when necessary. Senior staff may have more of a permanent presence. Who they will be sharing space with in the new building may shed light on the DC merger rumors. I was hearing from senior sources previously. I am told to see this move in the light that as Warner Brothers reorganizes, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, let's talk about this. I guess it was 2013. So yeah, it's been almost 9 years. They moved to Burbank. So we got Daniel Cherry leaving, and this other rumor that they are going to announce a merger of DC Comics. And why wouldn't they? I mean, everything is up in the air right now with Warner Discovery, but he's basically saying that they're going to do something like Marvel, he thinks, where they're going to merge the studios with the comics. I don't know. He's like, it's a merger. There's a merger coming. A merger with whom? No idea. Merging two divisions within Warner's, such as DC and HBO. DC and CW as a saleable entity. DC and consumer products. DC and DC film. I would say probably this one. Selling off DC to Disney so they can merge it with Marvel. Hell no. I do not see that happening. I don't think Disney's in the position to make any large acquisitions at this point. And everybody's like, yeah, Disney was buying everything. I'm like, yeah, they were buying everything. And it cost them. It's still costing them. They way overpaid for Fox. They've dropped the ball with Star Wars. I do not see them buying DC. I could be wrong. But I don't see them buying DC. I really don't. I think it's more likely that they'll merge the studios and have a superhero content creation source that just happens to do comic books. Comic books are not that important to these companies. I don't know why everybody thinks they are. They're like, they would never cancel this. They'd never cancel that. They'd never outsource their comics. Bullshit. Comics mean less to, well, at least in the case of Disney, I was literally told one time by somebody that worked in Disney publishing, comic books mean less to Disney than t-shirt sales. Like, what I'm saying, they way overpay for comics production costs, and they do not get a very high return. And to them, it's just ancillary merchandise. It's, again, just like any other collectible Spider-Man underoos or Spider-Man t-shirts or whatever. That is how important comic books are to Disney, at least. I don't know what's going to happen with Warner. I think it depends on David Zaslav, who is a tough cookie. From my understanding, this guy is all about the money. He's all about the bottom line. So I think there are some people at DC Comics that are in for a very, very rude awakening, and I would not be surprised if there was some kind of a reset or DC had to walk things back to more traditional sellable versions of characters to make this guy happy. It wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.